Welcome to Data Century Podcast, where we dive into the world of GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, with practitioners who are shaping the future of this space. I'm Dharita Gada, your guide for this series, and I'm thrilled to bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from industry leaders who've been in the trenches. At Data Century, we're all about empowering businesses to navigate the complexities of data security and compliance with confidence. Whether you are just starting your GRC journey or looking to sharpen your strategies, this podcast is here to inspire and inform. We are joined by Major Chetan Desai, CEO of SecureSearch. SecureSearch, a premier provider of employee background screening and risk management solutions, handles highly sensitive personal identifiable information, including that of senior executives. Given the critical nature of data privacy in this space, we are joined by Major Chetan Desai, CEO of SecureSearch. He will share his expertise on navigating the complexity of safeguarding the data privacy while ensuring compliance and security. Hi, Chetan. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Dharita, and thank you for having me here on this podcast. Happy to be here, and I look forward to our chat today.
So, shall we dive into our first question?
Let's do that.
Chetan, your company deals with a lot of sensitive personal information in the background screening space. So, how critical is it to have strong data security measures in place? And what could go wrong if there were security lapses?
Right. Like you rightly said, Dharita, in the background screening industry, our companies handle a lot of highly sensitive personal information, be it in terms of identity details, financial records, criminal history, employment data, educational credentials. Now, the sensitivity of this data and the potential consequences of a breach makes it very critical for us to have robust security practices. Now, why is it important? The most obvious reason is, of course, preventing identity theft. The personal information managed by us is valuable to bad actors, as you can imagine, including cyber criminals. And hence, strong security measures are required to prevent these data breaches, which could otherwise lead to identity theft, financial fraud, and misuse of any kind of this personal information. The other reason is to ensure regulatory compliance. Background screening companies are required to comply with data protection regulations like the DPDP Act in our country or the GDPR in Europe, the FCRA for background checks related to employments in the US, as well as other local data protection laws in other jurisdictions. And non-compliance, as you would be aware, can lead to heavy fines and possibly legal actions as well. The other factor is the trust element. Our clients entrust us with PII of their employees, and they trust us to handle this information responsibly. Any breach can have, severe reputational implications for both our clients and us, and which can, of course, lead to loss of business and credibility. And the last point I'd like to make is related to data integrity and accuracy, which is an absolutely essential element in our line of work. Proper security protocols ensure that data is not tampered with and help us in maintaining the accuracy and integrity of our checks. The second part of your question was related to, the implications. Well, the implications can be pretty severe, be it in terms of legal and financial repercussions from regulatory bodies, lawsuits, contractual penalties by our clients, eventual loss of business. There is also the risk of operational disruption because a data breach can halt operations and then you have to put in additional resources to do damage control. Compliance challenges, as I briefly touched on before, a breach can trigger mandatory breach notification requirements to the necessary regulatory bodies, and this can be followed by increased scrutiny. And last, but definitely not the least, is the repercussion for the individuals whose data can get leaked, in which case they can suffer from, financial losses, identity theft, and intrusion of their privacy.
So that's a great point, Chetan. The nature of background screening means you are dealing with highly sensitive personal data. So a lapse in security could definitely have significant consequences, as you just mentioned. Chetan, what are the top data security imperatives for your company and how do you address them?
For our company, data security is a critical aspect of our business operations. Some of the imperatives that I can think about are, one, encryption of sensitive data, and this needs to be done both in transit and at rest. Establishing strong access control and authentication measures, data minimalization and retention policies, wherein you only collect the data that is necessary and retain it for only as long as you need it. Then compliance with data protection laws. And then again, this is best managed by establishing a compliance team, appointing a data protection officer if needed, and someone who can, a team or an individual or both, which can oversee regulatory requirements and manage your internal policies accordingly. The next point is regarding regular security audits and carrying out vulnerability assessments. This needs to happen both in-house as well as using third-party security audit firms. Develop a robust incidents response plan, conduct regular drills, and train your people to recognize and respond to potential security incidents. A very important aspect that is often overlooked or not given the necessary importance is about employee training and awareness. And the need for this cannot be overemphasized. Your team needs to be trained on topics like phishing, password security, and data handling at a minimum. Another important aspect is ensuring that your third-party vendors and partners also adhere to, security measures and standards which complement your own policies and, processes at your organization. And I think the last point I would like to make is related to monitoring and detection of threat on a continuous basis. To the second part of your question on how these requirements are met, I'd like to emphasize the role of senior management. They need to take ownership of their organization's data security and establish, a security-first culture, invest in security technologies, and allocate the resources as required, which could include third-party security services as well.
That makes a lot of sense, Chetan. Given the increasing sophistication of cyber threats, companies like yours have to stay ahead of the evolving threats. As I understand, Chetan, SecureSearch is transitioning from ISO 27001 2013 version to 2022 version. So what is driving this shift and what benefits do you expect from the update?
We took the decision to transition to the most recent version, basically to keep up with the important changes and enhancements to the standard, which we believe align with the evolving cybersecurity threats and regulatory requirements. Some of the benefits that we identified with adopting the latest version of the standard was an enhanced risk management framework, which is more flexible and has a risk-based approach to managing the information security risks. This allows organizations to now tailor their risk assessments more effectively to their specific context and threat landscape. The other factor is that the control set has now been updated and reorganized with a stronger emphasis on cybersecurity. It also that the control structure has now been simplified. If I'm not wrong, the earlier version had about 114 controls or something to that number. That has now been brought down to 93 and has been categorized into, simple 4 themes, which is organizational, people, physical, and technological controls. Yeah, there is support for emerging technologies, including guidance for, managing services on the cloud and remote work environments. So the strategic advantages that we see in this transition is one, it gives us a competitive edge. It helps us be compliant with regulatory requirements, and it also brings in a lot of operational efficiency and resultantly long-term cost saving as well.
With the cybersecurity landscape, which is evolving rapidly, I can imagine the latest version of ISO 27001 does bring improvements that better aligns with today's challenges. Evidently, your industry has its own unique set of data security and confidentiality requirements. So apart from ISO 27001, are there any other certifications or accreditations your company is working towards?
The short answer to that, Dharita, is yes. Because, for us, it is extremely important that we pursue certifications and accreditation programs that are relevant to the nature of our business. In addition to the ISO 27001 that we are now transitioning to from the earlier version, we are also actively working towards getting the global accreditation program that is run by the PBSA, which is the Professional Background Screening Association. As the name implies, PBSA is a global association representing, over close to 800 members around the world. And this accreditation focuses on aspects like data security, legal compliance, and best practices applicable for companies, specifically in the screening industry. In addition to that, in the future, we may also consider certain other key certifications like GDPR compliance or FCRA compliance. That is according to our business expansion plans in the respective regions.
So ISO 27001 is undoubtedly a strong foundation, but any additional certification can definitely further reinforce trust. Chetan, implementing security standards while running a business is no small feat. So how do you balance the demand of rigorous certification processes while maintaining seamless business operations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me be honest, having gone through a number of certification audits over the years, I can vouch for the fact that balancing the demands of a rigorous certification program with maintaining your business operations seamlessly is a critical challenge for companies, and especially those who are in the small to medium sized segment. If I have to break this down into points, I would say, one, companies need to develop a clear certification strategy, which can start with identifying which certifications are more relevant to you, what do your clients need from you, and what are your regulatory requirements. The next step would be to conduct a gap analysis early and develop a clear action plan to address these. This kind of a proactive approach actually helps last minute disruptions. The next step would be to appoint a dedicated cross-functional project team, which should at a minimum have members from your IT department, from legal, from operations, and possibly from quality assurance. And then, have a dedicated project manager to lead this team. Then would be to implement changes incrementally and not try and overhaul the system in one go. It is also important to set realistic goals, something that is achievable, and that's something that you can work towards on an incremental basis. Also, it helps to break down your certification requirements into manageable tasks and schedules and try and get these done during low activity periods so that you reduce the impact on day-to-day operations. We have, a lot of automation tools available at our disposal today. And my advice to everybody would be to automate where possible. We can automate stuff like compliance tasks, including your data monitoring, access control, your incident response. And of course, all of this needs to be budgeted and where possible undertaken. And again, make sure that you maintain clear channels of communication with all stakeholders continuously.
Chetan, I feel that's the challenge many companies face. The security and compliance can't come at the cost of business continuity, and yet meeting rigorous certification requirements does take significant effort. So with the DPDP rules that are rolled out, what specific privacy areas do background screening companies need to focus on to stay compliant?
DPDP Act of 2023, rules that you just referred to, the rules of which are expected to be rolled out anytime soon now. This is going to have a big impact on on companies on almost all sectors across the industry. I can talk about the background screening industry, and a few of the points that I would like to talk about are first, data collection and limiting the purpose of the data that is collected. Now, again, in our industry, a lot of data and documents are required for undertaking a background check. Companies like us need to ensure that we are only collecting data that is necessary for the specific purpose of background screening and nothing else. A very important aspect that I'm going to talk about next is consent management. There is a lot of focus on this particular point, and it will do companies good to pay attention to this requirement. The requirement here is to obtain explicit and informed consent from individuals before we collect and process their information. Again, limit data processing to what is strictly necessary. The way we do it for data collection, the same rules apply for processing of data as well. We need to ensure appropriate data storage and security, ensure compliance with data localization requirements where necessary, and companies need to have data processing agreements with their third-party vendors and partners. Companies will also need to make a provision for ensuring data subject rights management. This is very clearly and exhaustively spelled out in the DPDP Act rules, which basically covers rights, data subjects' right to access, right to correction, right to erasure, and the right to data portability. The next step is to establish a proper grievance redressal mechanism where data subjects can raise any grievances they may have with the data collection or data processing steps that have been undertaken. And this act also has a requirement for organizations to notify the Data Protection Board of India and the affected data principals in case of a data breach. And hence, companies will need to develop a breach response plan for this as well. From a company leadership point of view, some of these strategic steps that can help in prepare for being compliant with the DPDP Act. One is to appoint a data protection officer if required. Again, this is very clearly spelled out in the rules on who needs or does not necessarily need a DPO. Next would be to review and update the privacy policies and make sure that they are aligned with the DPDP requirements. Third would be to develop data governance framework and establish policies for data classification, processing, and retention. Again, it will help to monitor regulatory updates so that you stay informed about what are the latest updates to the Act and related guidelines. And then lastly, it will always be beneficial to engage legal and compliance experts to validate your compliance strategies and your mitigate your risks.
Absolutely, Chetan. I guess you majored, your data privacy laws as well. In your experience, what is the common misconception about security or compliance that you would like to clarify?
Let me be very upfront about it. Many of us, if not all of us, have at some point fallen prey to some of these misconceptions. Most of these, at least in my experience, often stem from a lack of awareness, not having a proper understanding of the regulatory requirements, and sometimes also from a bit of overconfidence. So some of the more common misconceptions are, one, compliance equals security. A lot of companies would go in and get themselves ISO 27001 certified or any other certification that is relevant to their business. But what I think everyone needs to understand is that a certification does not automatically mean that the company is secure. Certifications, they ensure a baseline of security preparedness, but for ensuring comprehensive protection across the board, companies will need continuous monitoring, will need threat assessments, and you will actually need to adapt to the evolving risks. Another misconception that one comes across is that our data is safe because we use encryption. Encryption is great, it's necessary, but in itself is not enough to secure your data. Threats like phishing or inside breaches do not get covered through encryption. So this needs to be complemented by other measures like strong access controls and having secure data processing methods. Some of the other interesting misconceptions deserve some honorable mention here is only IT is responsible for security, or we are too small to be targeted. And again, you've probably heard this as well. If we haven't had a breach yet, we must be secure. This is where lack of knowledge or overconfidence or both kick in, and that's where we make ourselves vulnerable to breaches and security threats. So if I have to put it down in a brief manner, organizations need to make sure that we have adequate training, we have adequate education, to move away from these misconceptions and essentially have a proactive approach to security and compliance. And how do we achieve that? We do that through regular training, continuous monitoring, ensure that the policies that you have in place are updated and then enforced. And finally, this will never really work unless the leadership and the senior management are completely involved in it.
That's really insightful. Thank you for sharing all of this with us. Chetan, last but not the least, for organizations beginning their security and privacy journey, what key piece of advice would you like to offer?
Now, whether you're starting from scratch or somewhere along the way you're looking at enhancing your security measures, I think it's important to focus on the key principles and priorities of your company as well as best practices that one has access to. So some of these I'd like to talk about. One, start with a risk assessment. Identify your critical assets, your potential threats. Determine the impact of these threats to your risk profile. Establish a proper security and privacy framework. Develop practical policies and procedures. Get your leadership buy-in. Appoint a data protection officer, a DPO, or a CISO, that's your Chief Information Security Officer if required. Implement your basic security controls like access controls, encryption, backup, recovery, multi-factor authentication, and so on. Very important, and this is a long-term and ongoing requirement, and that is to build a privacy-centric culture. The way we can ensure that is through continuous training of our teams and of all stakeholders, conduct regular risk assessments and audits, prepare for your incident response, develop an incident response plan, run simulations, and establish communication protocols. Focus on data minimization and protection of this data. Wherever available, leverage technology and tools that are available to you. And lastly, I would say, engage external experts such as yourself to guide you along your journey.
That is such a great advice, Chetan. So many companies, especially startups and those expanding into new markets, struggle with where to start and when it comes to security and privacy. So this is going to be a great advice for them. Chetan, at Data Sentry, we have conversation about information security with many companies. But few organizations like yours are truly at the forefront of data privacy, setting a benchmark for best practices. Thank you for sharing your insights with us today. We truly appreciate your time and expertise.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dharita. It was a pleasure being on this podcast and having this wonderful conversation with you. Wish you the very best and thank you again. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you, Chetan.